The first Borderlands was the game that got me into gaming. I specifically remember when I was 12 years old, my older sister came back home from college with her boyfriend at the time, and they brought their Xbox 360 with them on the trip. Up to this point, my only real experience with gaming was sports games and platformers on both the GameCube and the Wii. The only shooter I'd ever really gotten into was Call of Duty 3 and the campaign. There was no multiplayer on the Wii version, and we didn't have internet anyway, so I didn't play that. But something about Borderlands interested me. I don't know if it was the art style or the gameplay that had guns that spewed acid and fire, or whatever else it was about the game, but it intrigued me. So during that weekend, me and my sister started to play through together, and I just had so much fun. Enough fun that when they left, I asked my mom for an Xbox 360 for my birthday, even though it was still a couple months away. That's just how much I was like, I have to have this for myself. I have to be able to experience this. And that fascination with Borderlands never really went away in the months before my birthday. I just kept talking about it, kept thinking about it, and I remember getting the game and immediately being able to just start a playthrough. And I think a couple days later, I started a playthrough with my mom, and that's where a lot of my early playing of it was. And that was just great. That was great. It was a really fun time. I even tried getting my dad into it, but he couldn't really figure out the controls. And since all of this, I've bought all the Borderlands games as they came out. Well, that might be a lie. I might have bought Tales from the Borderlands after after all the episodes came out, but I've played all of them. I love them. I have a profound love for the Borderlands series. I'll probably continue to buy every new game and every new bit of DLC as it comes out. I say all of this in an attempt to numb the pain of what I'm about to say. Borderlands 3 is an absolute mess, and sure, some of that is the unbalanced and tedious anointment system, the fact that mayhem levels and modifiers can make the game frustratingly difficult if you want to actually play the endgame content and get the best loot out of it, and other various gameplay issues that have moments of annoyance here and there. But overall, the gameplay is not the thing that makes me apprehensive about returning to Borderlands 3. The thing that makes replaying Borderlands 3 annoying is the story. There's parts of it where I can't go 5 minutes without rolling my eyes. Among the issues with the story are a complete lack of subtlety, where characters remind you what's going on with the plot, also unnecessarily forced humor that returns back to being loud and quote-unquote wacky when they can't think of anything clever, and the absence of most of the previous Vault Hunters, which leaves the cast feeling kind of emotionally empty, and without the sense of community and camaraderie BL2 had. These are problems that are obvious to most who play it, and I'm fully aware that there are others on YouTube who have gone into these particular problems in great detail already. But what a lot of critique of the game I think it does is pin a lot of the blame on some of the game's newer characters, like Ava and the Calypso twins, and make them out to be the problem, when they really just succumb to the same problems as every other character in the game. In fact, I think these three characters are so much not the problem with the game, that they're in fact the heart of some of the game's biggest missed potential. So now that you've got your pitchforks out, let's talk about it. The truly best aspects of Borderlands 3's main antagonists are all hidden away. The cutscenes and echo calls to the player during the main story are them at their most boring, their most forced, and more importantly, most of the game gives them an inconsistent dynamic with each other. One minute, Tyrene views Troy as a parasite who leeches off her power to survive. The next, it seems that he's the one who's actually pulling the strings of the operation. The next, they're fighting over who's more loved by their followers, and next thing you know, they're buddy-buddy and getting along great. And to this particular gripe, you may want to say, hey, that's just the complicated relationships siblings can have with each other. And I'd respond to that with, I know, I have older sisters and we make fun of each other all the time, yet we'd only call each other parasites in jest and when it's only family around, not in front of an enemy like they did in the game. I think there's an issue here because, one, I think it's hard for people to connect with and understand inconsistent characterization, but also because I think these two are much more compelling when they do generally enjoy each other's presence or having a lighthearted sibling rivalry, and when they're just having fun doing evil shit with each other. That can be fun. The game spends too many lines of dialogue on them kind of having disdain for each other. Troy having jealousy being particularly of note, especially given it's an idea that just kind of hangs there and doesn't really get addressed. It's like the writers of Borderlands 3 are trying to write them as having the same dynamic as both Katara and Sokka, and Zuko and Azula. Like, they're trying to both have humorous banter and them playing off each other, and they're trying to make it so, simultaneously, Troy is jealous of his more powerful sister. I think this dissonance means that when Troy starts using Tyrene to charge the Vault Key, it neither fully makes sense, nor comes to any real emotional surprise. On top of that, I think it really missed an opportunity for a boss fight where you fight both of them at the same time, perhaps with the help of Lilith and Ava. Give them something to do. Because this is the scene where Troy dies and you think Tyrene is dead. Then she pops up alive right when you think it's all over. The more powerful sibling survives. Have her be really distraught about her brother dying. Maybe put this all near the end and have that be the moment she merges with the Destroyer. Because I think one of the things these games did well with Handsome Jack storytelling-wise was have him be an emotional individual. Betrayals and loss affects him a lot. He had care for a select few, even in his own weird way, a distorted form of love. And we have a line partway through Borderlands 3 where Lilith says, "I doubt they care about anything but themselves." And yeah, that's completely true. But have them care about each other as more than just a feeling of responsibility. Because a pure evil villain that doesn't show emotion beyond anger and vengeance only works if there are other important antagonists who have deeper conflict. But the structure of Borderlands games doesn't really allow for that, characters like that. These characters have so many fun moments, and alongside that, there's something of a tragedy to them, both in the story of the game and in how a lot of fans perceive them. We have audio logs of their time on Necrodofeo that are kind of particularly tragic for Troy. His sister kind of manipulated him into leaving. There's other logs that are about their early time on Pandora, trying to survive with bandits, but all of the most interesting and compelling content around the two main villains is limited to side content, side missions, and random audio logs most players might not even notice. And even if you do pick those up as the player, main mission dialogue might interrupt you from ever hearing it. And it sucks. It's a shame, because they should be viewed as more great villains in a game series filled with other great villains. Yet they aren't. They're either thought of as annoying or just seen as an afterthought, which is still sadly a better fate than what happened to the next character I'm going to talk about. This is the real reason why I wanted to make this video. You can pretty easily find people on the internet who actually enjoy Troy and Tyrene as characters. Finding other people who actually like Ava is basically impossible, which I think is unfair, but also as the character that's largely used as the insert for fans of the previous games, it's kinda sad. She's the one who knows all the stories of the previous games. She gets excited about meeting the other characters. She wants more than anything to be a Vault Hunter. The idea of being a Siren one day is genuinely exciting to her. She is a fan of Borderlands. In a strange way, she's a reflection of ourselves as the player, which I think is a very interesting concept for a character, a friendly NPC who plays a role in the story, who in a way reminds us of ourselves. She's around the same age as many of us fans were when Borderlands 2 came out, and I love all of this conceptually. Ava is quite possibly the most overhated character in the history of fiction, especially when you look at just how much some of the people who hate her seem to despise her. I remember a thread on least favorite characters in the Borderlands subreddit, and someone said they hope she, quote, gets her brains blown out off screen and we never hear anything about her again. And if I remember right, this comment got upvoted, at least a little bit, so it wasn't an unpopular sentiment, despite the fact that abandoning characters and their arcs is the opposite of proper storytelling, but that's just where we at. People seem to just really absolutely hate her as a character. It all really leaves me wondering what's the problem here. Sure, Borderlands 3 is not exactly a masterpiece of writing, but Ava isn't so bad that this is a reasonable reaction. So, sitting down thinking about it, I've come to the conclusion that much of the player base of Borderlands 3 are heavily biased towards the characters of previous games. In the case of Ava, the previous characters she interacts with the most are Maya and Lilith, and the development those two get is, well, lacking. Meanwhile, Ava, while underdeveloped still, gets a little bit more than they do, and with the director's cut, she gets a whole quest line. Meanwhile, Maya is in the game for only like 20 minutes before she dies, and Lilith mostly mopes around the whole time as a zombie. Those other two sirens don't really do anything, especially regarding Ava. Maya is supposed to be her, like, mentor, Padawan Ava, if you will, but Maya as a teacher, well, yeah, apparently hasn't really taught her anything. Half of Maya and Ava's interactions are Ava telling Maya she's ready to go into the field and get into the danger, and Maya brushing that to the side, saying she's not ready. We, the player, don't get a hint of their found family type relationship they're supposed to have. We don't get to see their more tender moments. We don't see anything other than the bickering and the chastising. It's like Obi-Wan and Anakin in Attack of the Clones. And that's sad to me because master-apprentice relationships are often some of the best dynamics in fiction, but this one has no development, at least not any that will be seen by all players. There are side quests and epilogues that give a glimpse of Ava's tragic backstory and glimpses of what their life on Athenas was like, but all of that is optional content many won't play or find. Just like with Calypso's, a lot of her best content won't be found by everyone, because here's this girl who lost everything at a young age, finds a new family, and then loses the closest person to her all over again, which, yes, leads to her blowing up on Lilith, which is understandable, honestly, from her perspective. Lilith was basically just trying to move on with the same old mission like nothing changed. Ava's behavior here makes perfect sense for her character, and honestly, she's kind of right. Lilith is a shell of herself at this point, for the majority of the game, for various reasons. Oh, and for those people who still say, Ava is the one who got Maya killed. No, she didn't. Don't be an idiot. It's fine to dislike a character, but don't make shit up. The Calypsos were going to be going to the Promethea Vault anyway. They had already beaten Lilith but spared her. They were not gonna let Maya out of there. Maya and Ava may have had an argument in that scene, because, yeah, they're kind of not a well-developed master-apprentice relationship, but again, Maya hasn't really shown her much or taught her much, at least from what we've seen on screen, but Ava isn't why Maya was at the vault. Ava wasn't why the Calypso showed up. The information that she would someday be a siren maybe piqued their interest a little bit, but like, I doubt that would affect the fact that, yes, the Calypsos totally would kill Maya in that situation. So to me, blaming Ava for this is just retroactively justifying a reason to hate a character you already hate. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I just think that take seems weird. All that aside, in the end, I think this just covers up what's possibly the core motif for a character: loss. Ava's story is possibly the most tragic in the series, at least in line with Tina, largely because their stories are extremely similar. But while Tina's psychosis might have at least numbed some of the pain of all she's lost, and by the end of the Dragon Cube DLC, her Vault Hunter friends helped her cope with Roland's death, Ava doesn't get that really. Lilith tells everyone to keep pushing with the mission as normal. Maya was the closest thing she had to a family left, and she's being expected to just keep pushing ahead anyway, with the same mission that Maya was killed on, no less. I've said it before, but Ava blowing up Lilith is honestly completely understandable, and I think a lot of players don't get that because they're biased in Lilith's favor, because she was in the previous games, and I think that might be the only reason. But in the context of the story, Ava has a point. Sure, not put in the most diplomatic way, but she's a kid who's experienced an extreme amount of grief and trauma, and just experienced some more. She's not exactly in the headspace to put things nicely, and this is the tragedy of her and the game as a whole. By the end of the game, Lilith is no longer there. Tannis isn't great at dealing with emotions. The rest of the crew isn't there much. The previous Vault Hunters who were Maya's friends aren't around. The current Vault Hunters are her closest thing to a new family, and they're also gone regularly. Ava is Tiny Tina if she didn't have a support system, but instead had all the responsibility thrust on her shoulders. It's a tragedy that I doubt the writers of this game intended, but it's a personal tragedy nonetheless, and I think it's at least interesting to think about. Whenever I think about the main story of Borderlands 3, I just get sad, man. It should have been so good, but somewhere along the way, the writers just dropped the ball, and I don't know exactly where it went off the rails. Maybe it was when they decided to not have Krieg, Gage, Sal, and Axton in the game. Maybe it was when they rewrote a lot of it to try to make it more of a parody on streamers and social media influencers. I just know that there were good ideas in here that got muddied up by a bunch of complete and utter trash and lost focus. At times in the process of making this video, I questioned what the purpose of all this was, and I think in the end, I just want people to be able to appreciate and maybe even enjoy the imperfect. This is a flawed game. The characters weren't executed in a way that we would have hoped, but I still think there's something to appreciate about both Ava and the Calypso twins, the game as a whole. The ideas of them and what they could have been are powerful, more powerful than any angry fan, than the greed of any AAA publisher. The spirit of a flawed story is more important than any of its individual flaws. If Borderlands 3 was going to be disappointing, I'm glad it did so in an interesting way that's worth talking about than by just being basic or boring. And while I have issue with the writing, I do want to at least like say this at the end. The voice actors, animators, and art team all did a fantastic job on the game, and I just want to give them a huge shout out because I don't think those are groups of people that wind up getting appreciated enough. And if you're all still watching this, thank you. This is my first video and like this, and I'm hoping to keep this channel going, so please subscribe. I'm going to use this channel as a platform to just talk about video games and TV shows that I enjoy. I'm an animation geek and like to talk about the aspects of a piece of media other people don't talk about much. Themes, motifs, ideas, concepts. I'm just a geek, so if you want to, just hear a guy talk about geeky stuff for a bit, why not give a subscribe? Thanks. I'll catch y'all later.